And you guys aren't just some run-of-the-mill, people in your guys' mom's basement who said, hey, we're going to create a crypto game. You guys are ex-Ubisoft. Like, you guys used to work for one of the biggest, most amazing, gaming studios out there. You guys have a ton of experience in the gaming space, the normal gaming space. And you're coming from that realm. You're coming from the traditional gaming realm into the crypto space and building out, where there's a lot of crypto games out there that they're like, hey, we have crypto experience and we're going to try to build a game. And these games turn out horrible. People don't actually want to play them because they're not good at building games. But maybe they're good at building the crypto side, where I think today a lot of the infrastructure for these games is there. You don't really need to be that great at the crypto side of things. But you certainly have to be really good at building a good game if you want players to come play it. And so you guys actually are starting from a position of strength. And I think maybe a rarer position in the crypto space, in that you're an actual gaming team. You actually have some real traditional AAA gaming experience that you guys are bringing to the table. And you're excited to build some amazing games. Welcome to the Never Die Podcast, your weekly alpha for those who never quit. Today, I have on the podcast Spike, the founder of Persona, the NFT collection, and chief creative officer at Unagi Gaming Studio. Something I didn't realize going into this episode is the entire team behind Unagi, including Spike himself, are all ex-Ubisoft game developers. They've worked on games like Far Cry 3 and The Division and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. And they're building a Web3 gaming studio. They already have 2 live games, and they already have 500,000 signups between those 2 games. And in the middle of their brand, in the middle of their whole thing they're building, sits Persona. Persona, the NFT collection, is like at the core of their culture and their brand. And it's also a way you can stake these things to earn the upcoming UNA token. So those who stake their Persona NFTs get like an UNA airdrop, but it's like they're doing an airdrop a little bit different, where you earn it over time. This is a really interesting episode, and this is some alpha here. Like, this is some early access, some early stage alpha on some things that I don't think most people realize from a quality team. Let's get into it. Can you briefly explain what is Persona?
What is Persona? So Persona, the core definition of Persona would be a collection of profile pictures at the center of the Unagi gaming ecosystem. So to understand a bit what Persona is, it's needed to understand what Unagi is, because we really built Persona to be one of its core pillar, basically in its development. So Unagi is a Web3 gaming studio that we founded with 3 great friends of mine and ex-Ubisoft colleagues. Actually, we all worked at Ubisoft before. We founded the company in 2021. We were all like very big fans of crypto, Web3. We've been developing games for 10 years prior to building Unagi. But when we encountered a bit, the first time we encountered actually the blockchain concepts was with Ethereum in 2017. And we instantly thought, okay, we could build like so many cool things with it. Like, the promise of it was really interesting, especially for game developers, because we immediately started imagining like, oh, but imagine you could have this decentralized, like how cool would it be? So we followed a bit how it evolved. And at the end of our last production at Ubisoft, we were all like, okay, what's next? What's the next big project we want to do? And we all wanted to get into blockchain, actually get our hands in it. And it was a bit harder to do that within Ubisoft back in the days. Now it's a bit easier because mentalities changed and a bull run also went by since we left Ubi. But prior to us leaving, it was a bit harder to actually start your own blockchain like project within a big company, right? So we decided to leave to found Unagi with those 3 guys. Since then, now we grew to a 39 company size, so it's not just the 4 of us anymore. And the first game we built was Ultimate Champions, which is like a fantasy sport game, basically. It was a fantasy football game initially, then we released the fantasy basketball game after that, and we'll probably discuss it a bit more. But basically, after 2 years in Web3, 2 years and a half, we really wanted to expand a bit our ecosystem and also have like a brand that was a bit more relatable for Web3 people, and also beyond Web3 people, but just a brand that could be relatable to more a wider audience, basically. Because our games were very niche, I would say, in the sport area. So they were talking to football fans, basketball fans, but they were not necessarily like relatable for a lot of the Web3 DJs out there, and they are also not, I would say, the most mainstream IP to get into our universe, to get into our ecosystem. So that's where Persona was born. We really wanted a brand, like a flagship brand, that would enable us to widen our horizon and to become this very strong basis for all the upcoming projects that we wanted to build. Because we built a sports game initially, but we are like game developers at heart, so we don't forbid ourselves to potentially build a game of a totally different genre with dragons, an RPG or whatnot. To do so, it was important that we had this flagship brand, this entry point to everything that we're building that was a bit more, again, relatable for people, relatable for potentially Web3 people, relatable for Web2 people, so that they see that, okay, Unagi, the face of Unagi is actually very interesting and I want to know more. So that was the initial desire for Persona, and then we went on a long creative journey that we can that we can browse a bit together as well to get to the final product, the final brand that we see now.
In my opinion, it's working because Persona was one of the few NFT collections I've ever seen that caught my attention. I think it's the art, the style, and kind of like the aesthetic of it kind of really wrapped me in. I mentioned to you before we started the pod that I only own 2 NFT collections. One's Mad Lads and one's is Persona. And before that, I just wasn't interested in NFTs. But for whatever reason, Persona has like, I own quite a few of them now. Like I've a lot more than one. Nice. And that's just because it does have a really solid aesthetic to it. That's the only way I can describe it. But it's like, it's unlike anything else I've seen in the NFT space where you can almost see this whole IP or this whole kind of universe being built out of it. You mentioned that you worked for Ubisoft. Like you guys that founded this company, Unagi, worked for Ubisoft. How was that?
It was great. We had slightly different trajectories, but first, thanks a lot for the compliments. Having people that don't necessarily love NFTs but still went for Persona, I think it's the best compliment that we can give, especially currently because it's a bit harder to buy NFTs at the moment. It's not like the giga hype around it, and I think it's awesome to have people like you where like the brand really resonates and you just want it because you're drawn to the universe. That's exactly why we're building it, so always warms my heart. And yeah, at Ubisoft it was we had slightly different trajectory with the guys. On my side, I started as a game designer. So actually, most of my professional experience is as a game designer. It's only with Web3 that I actually started handling like more things than just game design, but also branding, art, like a lot of different things. Web3, but also because we're a startup, so you start with 4 people, you need to do more things. Which is really great. But initially at Ubisoft, I started as a game designer. Game designer on Far Cry 3, which was my very first game I had the chance to work at Massive Entertainment, which is a Ubisoft studio in Sweden. I had the chance to go there quite early to get an internship, and then they hired me as a junior game designer, and I stayed there for for many, many years. So the first game I worked on over there was Far Cry 3. Of course, as an intern, so they had me check the walls and the nav mesh to see if your character wouldn't fall down. So not the most crazy type of creative stuff yet. But then I had the very great opportunity to work on an upcoming MMO that they were trying to build over there. So they had this WoW, World of Warcraft killer project that they were developing in this secret floor at the top of the building. And I knew they were building it, but I saw nothing of it because they were very secretive about that. But then one day they realized that I was a huge World of Warcraft player myself, and they kind of liked what I was doing on Far Cry 3. So they were like, oh, okay, maybe you should join the team upstairs and and see what they do over there. And they were actually building an MMO based on the Tom Clancy IP. So back then it was really your typical MMO, exactly like World of Warcraft, but with a shooter IP basically. And this game, over the years, because it was a very long development, because then we had a complete reset of the game to then build a game that The Division became, basically. Tom Clancy's The Division, which was a more of a next-gen third-person shooter, basically. But still with a lot of RPG features. So on my side, I still loved working on it because everything RPG related back then, I was just crazy about that. And yeah, after The Division, that took a very long time. I wanted to experience slightly shorter production cycles. So I went back to Paris to a studio where then I started working with Charlie, Remy, and Mathieu, my three co-founders. And then we worked on mobile games. It was a very, very interesting experience because when I was working on AAA games, so you learn a lot about, I would say, very precise big production mechanism when you work in this type of big production. But on the free-to-play side, I learned a lot more about the product, basically, because it was a free-to-play game and not a premium game. So you learn about monetization, you learn about retention, a lot of terms that, honestly, when you work on a AAA game, you look at them quickly, but you don't really care that much. It's just how many copies did we sell. But on the free-to-play mobile side, it was a lot more about the product, and it taught me a lot of things that are extremely useful right now in Web3 and in the games we develop now. And that was crazy interesting. So I did that for like 3-4 years. And after that, of course, that's when we decided to leave and to build Unagi.
How does Persona and Unagi tie together?
Oh, it's a great question. So, so the first thing is it's kind of a weird positioning because we built this brand, but it's of course a profile picture type of brand initially. Like the main product initially is a profile picture. Of course, now we are looking to expand it a lot more than just a profile picture. But since we are a game studio, it's the main question we get asked like all the time. Like, okay, you're a game studio, you have this you have this brand that is a profile picture collection. Like, what's the link between the two? And how we tie it, it's quite simple. We create ties in our ecosystem between Persona and everything else in it. So the bigger tie that we have that really links all our products to Persona is the benefits that you will get with your Persona NFT through the UNA token that we are releasing soon. Because basically you have to imagine that all our games generate revenue. The idea is also for the UNA to power all our games. And basically they create some value accrual towards one token, which is the UNA token, and then you get benefits through the UNA token with Persona. So that's a bit how it's linked to let's say the success of whatever else we build in a way, let's say, in that way. And then on the other way around, we also want to create some clear benefits in our experiences if you have a persona. So typically in Ultimate Champions or fantasy sports game, we'll have two types of benefits. One will be a fee reduction that you will have when you trade cards in the game. We have marketplace fees. If you own a persona, you will basically have smaller marketplace fees. And we'll also create dedicated competitions for persona holders in the game specifically. So how I like to imagine it is a bit, how to describe it is a bit like, imagine you're paying for a subscription or paying for a battle pass in a game. That's a bit how I imagine being a persona holders in regards to our games, meaning that you will get benefits that are cool, like really cool benefits that you do want, but it's also not game breaking for all the other players that don't have a persona. They can still enjoy the game, they can still progress. It's not like game breaking because we don't want to be too intrusive, like, wow, you need a persona if you want to play or if you or if you want to just enjoy the game. We don't want necessarily that. We just want personas to be like this really cool added value if you play our games and are a holder of persona. And then in the future, we hope to create even stronger ties. Of course, we're a game studio, so developing a more dedicated experience around the persona brand is something we have on our mind, let's say, that is of course on the table. And every other game that we plan to build or other product, the idea again it will be to create this very clear tie in between product, token ecosystem, and direct utilities from persona towards the product and the token.
Can you explain how the NFT staking works with the UNA token? So how staking your persona. I saw that on Twitter or somewhere on the website or somewhere that if you can stake at some point you can stake your Persona NFT, and there's going to be some sort of Una token reward. Can you maybe dive into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you will have two things. You will have the holders perks, and then you will have some double staking mechanism. So I hope we don't lose too many people on this, but to be very to make it simple, let's say, if you hold a persona, you will get, without doing much, or you will just have to stake it, but just one action basically, you will get naturally some Una tokens over 8 months. That's the idea, and that will be 4% of the total supply of Una. But on top of that, so it's 8 months, so it's relatively short term in terms of a staking mechanism in Web3. Usually it's a bit longer term. So this is a bit like the dedicated allocation for Persona holders. And on top of that, we want to create a double staking mechanism where you can stake your Persona plus some Una amount. And there you will also get Una over time, but it will be a mechanism that will have like a longer length, basically, because we want this one to be sustainable. We want this one to be running on the long run, not just your mechanism where we are pumping tokens and then there is there is nothing 6 months later. So this one, the double staking, is going to be more over time. It's 10% of the total supply, but that will be distributed in a longer time period than the 8 months. And both you will be able to do the staking in the platform that we are releasing next week. So the platform releasing next week is not with the staking, actually. Actually, I'm saying next week, but I don't know when the podcast will be released. So maybe not next week, but the week of the 23 of April. But on the platform, we won't have the staking live in the first version that we'll release, but it's on this platform that the staking will be available when it's released.
And is the staking sort of like your guys' version of an airdrop? I guess it's like it's like an airdrop, but you have to stake it to get the airdrop, and it's just distributed over time.
Exactly. For us, it's more about trying to build something sustainable. Always in our games or in everything we develop, we kind of know Web3 at this stage because we've been investing in different projects as Web3 legends ourselves, left and right. But also we've been running games and we've been running like different operations for quite a long time now in Web3 terms, I would say. So we know that we would have like a bigger impact if we did a bigger envelope that would like unlock all at once on day one when the token is released. But it's also a lot of added pressure on the token, and it's not the most sustainable because you create a huge pump, but potentially a huge dump after that. So that's why we designed both systems to, yes, be very generous with holders, but over time, so that it's a bit healthier for the token.
I just want to make sure I got it right. So it's a total of 14% of the supply. So 4% goes to those who just stake the NFT, and then 10% goes to those who stake the NFT plus some Una token.
That's exactly that.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned it's also kind of like a club, so that in like these games you're releasing. So right now you guys have 2 sports games, but you're going to be releasing other games over time. You have special perks. You're like a VIP member of these games by being a Persona holder. Okay.
Exactly.
Is there a game for Persona coming? I know I've seen some people talking about that, like in the Discord. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just speculation. But is there like some sort of Persona game coming, or is that something you can talk about?
We didn't announce anything yet, but we are a game studio, and Persona became kind of naturally one of our biggest brands. So of course we are thinking along those lines. But yeah, we are thinking along those lines. It's a bit too soon for us to announce anything and whatnot. But there are a lot of things we want to develop around Persona to really develop the IP, develop the brand, and of course, games in general are just like a great medium to explore the lore, great medium to acquire a user in your ecosystem, to retain them, a great medium to do a lot of things, basically to have monetization, to really get the ball rolling. So for sure, now that Persona became by default like such a strong brand in our ecosystem and in Web3, we want to do more things with it. That's why we are exploring like different area of development, and games being our expertise and what we know how to do and very confident with it, it's of course on the table. Yeah.
That's really interesting because it feels like we're almost experiencing this weird shift of the normal meta of the NFT space. Because if you look around, you have like Pudgy Penguins, and they've kind of have this vision of like these like in real life physical toys, this sort of like metaverse, this whole IP, this whole brand. You have Mad Lads, which they have like their backpack exchange, their backpack wallet, and sort of this brand they've built around that using the Mad Lad brand. And then you guys, Persona, which you have this whole gaming studio and all these games and all this added utility and things you guys are mentioning. Do you see that as maybe like almost like a new NFT meta that's emerging in the space?
If I'm being honest, I would say maybe Yuga, for example, has a formula that is a bit similar to us. They did it a bit the other way around, where they started with a PFP collection and then decided to go into gaming and build like all those gaming experiences. So they didn't do it in the same way as us, because we started with games and then we went for the collection, and now we are like adding pillars and more games into this ecosystem. But I could see a meta where we do have some successful Web3 games. Whenever they will want to do more type of brands and enlarge their ecosystem, I could see a meta where they go for such a collection. Because right now the problem I see very often is that they stay confined within the same brand of one game. Which is great for one game, but if you're here for the long run as a game studio and you want to do more, if you have an NFT collection just for one, it's not necessarily going to work for another game, basically. And usually their PFP collections are very tied to the game brand. So I could see a meta where games that do find success, or game studios that do find success in Web3, actually go for this kind of development to enlarge their ecosystem. Because it makes a lot more sense compared to making a PFP collection that is just tied to one game. Because it's very hard to even if it's a big game, it's harder to see the ecosystem through it, I think.
And it's obviously last cycle we had NFTs, but they were literally just profile pictures, and so that you'd build like a brand and almost like a tribe and a culture around that profile picture. But you guys are taking it like, and there was people that kind of like almost, they tried to add sort of forms of utility, but it was like sort of half-hearted and half-baked. And yeah, like kind of you mentioned, you guys are coming from the other end. You're like, you didn't want to launch an NFT collection. You wanted to launch a gaming studio. And the NFT collection comes to complement that, not the reverse, right? It's not you like, hey, we launched an NFT collection. We're trying to find some utility for this. For this NFT collection, it's, hey, we have this gaming studio and now we're trying to build a brand around it. And that it's just interesting to me because you guys did that with the backpack exchange. Like I think that was their initial thought, was like, hey, we want to launch an exchange and a wallet. This is how we'll build a brand around it. And Pudgy's is kind of weird because Luca ended up buying it and everything. But I think when he got it, it's when he turned it around and built the brand, and he kind of had that brand mindset from the get-go himself for how to connect it there. So it's really interesting in evolution of the NFT space.
Yeah, it's very different passes indeed. Yeah.
Can you go into more detail about the UNA token? So you talked a little bit about it. What other ways is the UNA token used throughout your what you guys are building?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best example, and that's the cool part, and just to bounce back on what you said, the cool part is that we do have live products, so we can rely on them to say, that's how we plan to do things, because it's already live and it's already kicking. And on Ultimate Champions, for example, the UNA token, you can purchase absolutely everything in it. We also use it for rewards, so you can win some UNA token in Ultimate Champions and then use it to purchase a pack with new cards, to purchase marketplace cards from other players, and so on. And how we try to simplify the value accrual mechanism, because sometimes it's a bit hard in Web3 to understand, okay, well, you have those games, you have those products, there is a token, but how is it beneficial? How is the product beneficial for the token? It's usually beneficial because you have exposure, basically. So this product is great, it's working, it has users, it has a token. People just assume right away, okay, I'm going to buy the token because the product is working. But if you look a bit deeper, sometimes it's not as obvious, like what's the value accrual between the product and the token. In some cases, you will have a lot of governance, for example, in Web3, where there is absolutely zero value accrual, it's just governance, and you're like, okay, well, why not? It's a value proposal, but but it's not super clear to me, like, if this product actually finds massive success, why would the token be valued that much then? And in some other cases, you do have some value accrual, but when you dig a little bit, it's either not super sustainable or you can see the flows basically. In our case, we did a lot of back and forth, and it was not the case before in Ultimate Champions. But now where we are landing with the UNA is that every purchases that will be done in UNA token in our games will be burnt like right away after basically. And that's our way to say, like, okay, if the game is successful, if you do have UNA purchases, if you do have people that play it and so on, it should create naturally this very clear value accrual towards the UNA token through the burning. It's not going to a wallet where we do nothing with it or blah, 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 or we put it in there and there. It should be in burning, which should be impacting basically in a positive manner the price action and the token. So that's what we're trying to do. That's how we are setting things up. For the UNA token. Of course, if we have more again gaming experiences that will use the UNA, the idea will be to do the same thing. And of course, in our games, we don't have just UNA purchases. We also have people that buy stuff with their credit card because they are Web2 players that arrive. They don't know what the token is or an NFT or whatnot. So they arrive and they buy in credit card, and this revenue we still keep it for operations basically. But the rest of the revenue, that the circling revenue in UNA basically, or people bringing UNA up, spending it in our game, the idea will be to have this very simple and clear mechanism that people can understand.
So let me explain it back so I make sure I understand it. So when people pay in the UNA token, that gets burned. So like if they pay 100 UNA token for an NFT or whatever, that 100 UNA token is now gone forever. It gets burned, and that reduces the overall supply. And that's like a way to add value to the UNA ecosystem because there's less tokens in supply, and so that should, with increased demand, less supply should push up price. But the way that you guys make money is that, there's also going to be players that obviously play these games that are Web2 players, that they have credit cards. And when they make purchases with their credit card, that goes to you guys, and you guys use that to like continue funding development, your studio and everything like that.
Exactly. And you do make also slightly more money, sometimes on fees, sometimes, but those are like, it's what I like to call like clean revenue basically, because it's not revenue where you necessarily rely on releasing a new NFT in your game, which will like decrease existing NFTs value, or it's not revenue that relies on you emitting like new tokens or whatnot. It's a revenue that is like generated based on just people trading, which is the main activity, and this is what I like to call like clean revenue. So typically on Persona, like the trading revenue is a very healthy revenue. We have the same on UC, and you can have the same on trading, for example, on around your token in liquidity pools and whatnot. And this revenue for me is the best because it doesn't rely on you impacting negatively your economic loop, basically. Just to give an example, that's how we fixed. I say fixed. It's not fully fixed, but that's how we drastically improved at least the economy in Ultimate Champions. So Ultimate Champions, for the ones that don't know and listen, it's a very simple game. It's a fantasy sport game where you collect cards of football players or soccer players for our American friends, or basketball players. Actually, we have basketball with the EuroLeague as the main partner, basketball partner there. You collect those cards, and based on the performance of those athletes in real life, you will have a score in game, and it defines the score of your team and how much you win against other players, basically. So very simple type of game to start with. But the problem we had is that for maybe a year and a half, we were relying entirely on selling NFTs to make our revenue. So selling new cards, which when I say it like that, it sounds logical, right? You just sell your game content to make your money, right? But we were doing that for like a year and a half. And the problem is that at some point, if you have an obligation of revenue, like, okay, this month I need to make 1 million. You have this obligation of revenue, but your only way to do it is to release new NFT. Then you end up in a very problematic place because selling new NFT in the end will decrease the value of currently circulating NFTs. To give an example, if you have Mbappe, for example, an Mbappe card, there are like 10 different Mbappe cards of a set rarity. If I'm releasing 10 more to make my money, but the 10 existing Mbappe cards will decrease in value, basically. And that's the problem we've been having. It's the problem that Sora is having as well. And that's why card prices kept going down. And we took kind of a drastic turn at some point. And we sacrificed our revenue for 7 months to do so. But we said, okay, we'll stop selling an insane amount of new cards that makes no sense to generate revenue, because the problem is that it's a death spiral, because the cards are worth less money, so you sell them for less in the end, and you generate less revenue, and it never ends. The only way it can go well is that if you have an insane amount of new players that suddenly comes and creates new demand. So we stopped selling. Sorry, I'm going way too far in this explanation. But we stopped selling new cards entirely. Not entirely, but we diminished by, I think, 70% or 80% for since we made that decision. And we increased our marketplace fees, or internal marketplace fees on Ultimate Champions. And for a couple of months, we were actually generating way less revenue, way less. But the prices of the cards all started going up, basically. Community sentiment started going up when it was really not great. Every KPI we had, except revenue, started going back up. Retention, absolutely everything. And a year later, we are finally in a really great state where revenue picked up again due to the prices of cards being higher, the marketplace volume being higher, and so on. And we have also a much happier community because we stopped destroying their game content valuation, basically. So that's why it's just an example, but it's just to illustrate that fees typically, in my opinion, are what I call really clean revenue in an economy, because they don't rely on you, emanating more tokens, more NFTs, something that will actually negatively impact all assets in your economic loop. It's just relying on people trading, and you will always have people trading, so that's great. And taking a bit of money from that and living with it for operations is actually perfect if you manage to do so.
How many players are playing these games? Or how big is your guys' active player base?
It's pretty big. I think in total we had 500,000 total registrations. I think we have around it fluctuates because we are a sports game, a fantasy sports game. So typically at the beginning of the season, you will have twice the amount of monthly active users compared to the end, so which is completely normal. All those games have that, but it fluctuates between 30K and 40K monthly active users.
That's crazy. So 500,000 registrations, 30 to 40K active users. I mean, for any crypto app, that's that's massive. That's huge.
Yeah, that's massive, but it's completely unknown by the Web3. When we have a token, we have NFTs, we have all that, and that's also what pushed us, to make Persona, because we had all that. And we're like, oh, it's crazy. We're in the top 5 of the most played game on BNB chain for a year, 2 years, but nobody cared in Web3 because we didn't necessarily have a brand that resonated with Web3 gens. If you didn't like sport or this exact type of game genre, then you were just not interested in it. And the crowd that we have in the game, in a similar fashion, they are not that fan of Web3. And it was very fun when we did Persona because we gave a lot of whitelists to our best players. They could win it in a competition in the game, which was really fun. And honestly, for I think 70-80% of them, it was the first time they ever bought an NFT. They did the MetaMask, they did all that. Before that, they were just playing the game. They had NFT in the game, tokens in the game, but they really didn't care about the rest of Web3. And now they go on Blur, they go on OpenSea, they browse other collections. So in a way, we brought a good amount of people to Web3 too that way, which was cool.
That is so cool because that's one of my big theories or thoughts is that over 2024 and 2025, we're going to see a lot of amazing crypto games hit the scene, and they're going to onboard more people into the crypto space than literally anything else has before. And this is almost proof of it because look how many users you guys have versus some of these top crypto apps. They have it's not that many. It's 10,000 maybe active users a month. It's It's so small, I think it would shock most people. It's just they're throwing around a lot of volume as far as like dollar wise, but there's just not that many active people actually on chain. And it's going to be games like this that onboards a ton of people into the crypto space and gets a lot of people on chain. And they might not even necessarily know they're on chain. It'll be playing games like this where they're just, they're not having to know a lot of crypto things to do it. It's just they have these skins or whatever or cards that they own and can trade, and that's really the killer element of crypto gaming is player owned assets.
Absolutely, I fully agree.
I was going to ask, I don't know if you can tell me, but do you guys have a date for when you're launching the UNA token?
We don't have a date yet, so it's the very frustrating thing when you try to release a token is that you're in discussion with exchanges, like trying to find a bit the best home and the best way to launch it. And sometimes you get very clear to an agreement, then it's like, actually, we would like to see a bit more numbers, a bit more volume, and so on. So right now we're focusing on really spreading the word as much as we can around the token, because in the past months, we've been very focused about Persona. It was a bit hard to do Persona on top of the token, even if we tried, but it was a bit hard. So now that we have Persona and it became this great brand to also showcase a bit the rest of the ecosystem, we are in a better position to start also promoting the UNA token. So that all our immediate next steps that you will see, but already today we posted a little capsule which is a teaser of what's to come. But we are releasing the V1 of the Persona platform with the main objective to start promoting the UNA token. Then we'll add more and more cool features specifically for holders to find each other, to connect with each other, also to try to reward creators. A lot of additional features that will be very beneficial specifically for holders. But this V1, it will be open for everyone. Holders will have still bonuses and more benefits than everyone else, but it will be open to everyone, and we'll start really a bit of a heavier marketing campaign to promote the UNA, to tell people what it is, and to spread the word basically.
And with the UNA token, are you guys going to launch it just like a normal launch? Like, hey, it's now live on the exchange. It can start trading. Are you still airdropping immediately any sort of percentage to anyone, or what sort of launch are you guys looking at?
It really depends. It depends. We discussed a lot of different possibilities with different exchanges and internally. So at the moment, we don't have one yet fully decided. It's still being discussed. So at the moment, we don't fully know ourselves. But yeah, we kind of know how we would like to do it, but it's still being discussed. And it's very frustrating because it's also part of the process that you can't really explain that much, I would say, to our communities or whatnot. Sometimes they're like, oh, why is it taking so long? Because it's a lot of business discussions with one exchange and the other. Then you say, oh, but we have this one, look at our KPIs or growth or amount of users. It's a lot of discussions, basically, a lot of discussions. What helps to speed the process, it's completely... I was about to say it's a bit stupid, but it's also very normal. It's just the hype around the project, basically. As soon as you have a lot of hype, a lot of eyeballs, as soon as your marketing campaign starts really taking off and the token is everywhere in your timeline, then you can get listed right away very quickly. But that's why now we are also launching all those efforts to speed things through and speed up a bit the discussions around it. And yeah, hopefully it won't be in too long.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a really complicated thing, and you only get to launch once, so you don't want to mess it up. So you want to take your time, make sure you do it really, really well. And
exactly.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. As far as staking goes, is that going to come before the token launches? Are you going to be able to stake your NFT and almost accumulate the tokens before they launch? Obviously you couldn't sell them, but you'll almost like points you'd kind of see hey, I'm accumulating tokens, and then once it launches, those would unlock. Or how's that going to work? Is that going to come with the launch of the token?
Yeah, it's a possibility, but we have it's going to be a bit hard to explain today because the platform is not yet live. So we have to project ourselves a little bit. But basically, in the platform, you will be able to gain points, and those points they will get you the capsule that we teased today, which will be basically an allocation of UNA. Holders of Persona will get a lot more points through the different type of quests, and basically the points will initially just work for the capsule. But then the idea in season 2 of the platform, if we may call it like that, in season 2 of the platform, we'll reset the points. Then you will gain points again as Persona holders, but also in a lot of different ways. It's not just going to be quest. Actually, we'll probably stop that after the airdrop campaign. You will be able to gain points if you follow other Persona community members, if you use a persona as a PFP, and also if you just hold personas. All of those actions will just naturally make you gain points, and then the points will be used as a little bonus on your staking. But all of that, just to say, actually, I think it's the first time I explained all that. But we'll explain it a lot more in socials. It's going to be clearer in the next few weeks. But just to say that since the airdrop campaign might last up until we release the UNA, it's possible that the staking will only be available after the UNA token is live as well. It's also possible that the timeline is the other way around. At the moment, it really depends on when we actually launch the UNA and we manage to develop all the features in the production timeline. So it's possible that one comes after the other, but I'm not fully sure just yet.
Got it. Okay. I mean, obviously, as a holder, I have all these questions. Another question I had is, if you have multiple personas with the same wallet, is that going to hurt you in some way? Or say you're earning points or whatever with one persona. If you have two personas, are you now earning just the same as if you'd had one, or you're earning double? How does that work?
So they are. So it's tough to split too much, because for each persona account, you need your wallet with your persona and also a Twitter account. Of course, it's not necessarily going to stop bots. But then what we do is we do have modifiers based on if you have multiple personas. So it depends for what, because there are a bit different ones. But typically, if it's just the points you gain holding persona, you can have the persona split in between multiple wallets or within the same one is going to be the same amount of points. So you won't be penalized if you have them all in one wallet. For the PFP, you could say, if I create another account and I split in between my wallets, maybe I can get slightly more points there. It's a possibility. On that one, I would not mind too much if it means having a lot more personal PFPs out there. But of course, we'll be vigilant on bot accounts and so on. And on the quest, we also have a modifier for your depending on how many personas you have. So it will still be kind of good to have them all in one wallet and to farm the point quest. And the other type of points, it's not going to be that beneficial to split them either.
Got it. So what you're saying is, yes, it is beneficial to have multiple, and you're not going to get hurt, except for in things that, obviously, with your Twitter profile picture being a persona, you can't have two personas as your profile picture or three personas as your profile picture. So you'll miss out on that aspect.
Exactly.
But there's no way you can. I mean, you could go split it across multiple Twitter accounts, but that's just weird, and so that makes sense. I was just asking because I have quite a few of them, and I'm like, okay, so does how does this work? How does that how does that play out? Especially with staking, I was curious, am I only going to be able to stake one? Am I going to have to go create 10 different wallets or 20 different wallets?
No. You'll be able to stake them all, and we're doing everything so that you don't have to split them to get the most of it. At least that's what I can say.
Got it.
So you'll be able to stake all of them in one account and so on. Yeah.
One thing that's kind of become a popular thing in the crypto space, especially with NFTs, especially with Mad Lads, Pudgy Penguins, and a couple other ones, is that they have been getting airdrop allocations for big projects. So the wormhole airdrop, Mad Lad holders got some. I don't know if Pudgy's got some, but different projects. I think they must have teams on the back end that try to go get these allocations for holders. Is that something you guys have thought about or talked about doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to anticipate what's going to be a hype token or not, to be fair. We do have quite a strong collab manager in place. He's a lot more than a collab manager, but but on our side, it's Fabs that helps a lot with actually the potential collaborations we could get for Waitlist or for tokens on that side. How we see it, what's the most interesting for us is to potentially try to tie Persona to some innovations in the Web3 space that we find very interesting. I'll name one just to name it, but don't read into it too much. But typically, what the guys at Floor Protocol build is super interesting, in our opinion, with the BT404 and everything that we've seen. But it's still a bit hard in terms of UX to become like a real catalyst to make more waves, I would say, at the moment in its current state. But I absolutely love the innovation. I think a big issue that we have right now with NFTs, especially on Ethereum, is just the price tag is absolutely insane. So I think it could be amazing if you can buy like 1/100th of this collection as soon as you have like 100 tokens, like it becomes one NFT, so you can slowly grind towards it. I think for smaller wallets, it's amazing. Actually, on the topic, I think the only problem is that right now this technology is still on Ethereum. But I think as soon as we manage to have this on a layer 2 or somewhere where the gas transaction is cheap, meaning that anyone can buy like 100% of a Persona for $10 gas comprised. It should be still more, but you see my point. Like for a low price tag, I think as soon as we have that, then for NFTs it's extremely powerful because they become as liquid and as interesting potentially as a meme coin or something like that. So we're super interested in that and super interested in other things like layer 0 and so on. The UNA is actually going to be a layer 0 token. And that's kind of how we position ourselves. It's not necessarily towards a specific airdrop, I would say, but we do think that the most interesting ones often come from using innovative technologies for our projects that we do find interesting. Because then, of course, the team is going to be more inclined to consider us as a project using their technology for potentially an airdrop if they ever do a token. So that's a bit our mindset with Persona.
Yeah, and it also seems like maybe like crypto, like the whole crypto gaming space, right? There's going to be a ton of different crypto gaming tokens, from games to infrastructure to marketplaces to all kinds of things, and that could even be a niche for like you guys to go after of like, hey, we have a bunch of people that are holders of the Persona NFT that are super into gaming or super into this space and really invested into it, and that might be some good alignment too. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely.
You've talked about things on Twitter. You've talked about like a council, time masters, and like sort of this whole, it's almost like a lore thing for the Persona collection. What's that all about? Or how does that tie into things?
Nice. I'm glad you asked. So I'm not going to reveal it today, but we are working indeed on the council definition, let's say, within the community. The goal really is to have the holders of those specific NFTs play a bit of a more central role within the community and potentially within the brand development. So it's a bit of a challenge because you don't necessarily choose your NFT holders. So maybe some will want to be part of it, some won't. But that's how we imagine it, is just to make them play a slightly more central part. It's also going to be characters that will be a bit more central in the lore and in some parts of the universe that we develop. And that's how we see it moving forward. So it could lead to many different ways, but the idea was really to create this subgroup within the collection that was highlighted even in the metadata as, okay, they have those weird holes. It's not necessarily linked to a visual because it doesn't impact their visual. They are very rare, of course, because they have a mix of extremely rare traits, all of them. But the metadata concealer or time master or prism master is actually not a piece of visual in the PFP. But we wanted to immortalize that to build more things on top of it. And yeah, like I said, mostly lore and community, a community role, basically.
Okay, so I'm going to try to summarize kind of everything we've talked about so far. So Persona is an NFT collection that ties into the broader Unagi brand, and that brand is it's a crypto gaming studio. You guys already have 2 games out. These games have over 500,000 signups. They have about 40 to 50,000 monthly active players. You guys have a token, the Una token. That token is going to tie into to the Persona NFT collection, in that those that stake these NFTs are going to be able to earn that. It's sort of like a long-term airdrop that happens over months or happens over a long time period. So you're staking and then you're slowly accumulating these Una tokens. And not only that, but the Persona NFT collection is going to have a major role in tying into the entire brand. Like as far as like it's like a VIP club for some of these games. Potentially there's other things like maybe it could have its own game one day, maybe not. But overall, it's like it's like the centerpiece of the Unagi brand and culture, and it's a way to tie that into the Web3 space.
I did 2 thumbs up, but you don't see me. Yeah, absolutely. Oh. That was a magnificent recap.
Perfect. Okay, cool. I didn't know a lot of this stuff. Oh, and I forgot to mention, and you guys aren't just some run-of-the-mill, people in your guys' mom's basement who said, hey, we're going to create a crypto game. You guys are ex-Ubisoft. Like, you guys used to work for one of the biggest, most amazing, gaming studios out there. You guys have a ton of experience in the gaming space, the normal gaming space. And you're coming from that realm. You're coming from the traditional gaming realm into the crypto space and building out, where there's a lot of crypto games out there that they're like, hey, we have crypto experience and we're going to try to build a game. And these games turn out horrible. People don't actually want to play them because they're not good at building games. But maybe they're good at building the crypto side, where I think today a lot of the infrastructure for these games is there. You don't really need to be that great at the crypto side of things, but you certainly have to be really good at building a good game if you want players to come play it. And so you guys actually are starting from a position of strength, and I think maybe a rarer position in the crypto space, in that you're an actual gaming team. You actually have some real traditional AAA gaming experience that you guys are bringing to the table, and you're excited to build some amazing games.
That's you're making me blush almost. No, that's a great recap. Absolutely.
Cool, man. You're getting me pumped. And you did mention earlier that you guys 2 sports games right now, but that's not where you want to stay. You want to build out a pretty robust portfolio of maybe some fantasy games, maybe some shooters. Like who knows? Just but you guys aren't stopping there. You guys want to build a huge collection of games.
Exactly.
Well, as always, none of this was investment advice. None of this was me telling you to buy anything or to invest in the Una token or to go buy a Persona NFT. This is just us having a conversation about what they're building, all these cool things. Obviously, crypto's risky. Obviously, holding any crypto asset can be incredibly risky, and you should always make those investment decisions, doing your own research and knowing what you're getting into personally, not just listening to a podcast and throwing your life savings into a random token or NFT collection.